Hi, my name is Angel. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to another reading vlog. Let me start off by saying today is a very gloomy day. It is raining a lot outside and it's very cloudy, so hopefully that is not affecting the lighting in this video too much. So in today's reading vlog, I'm reading the New York Times Best Horror List of 2024. So I want to quickly just cut to that footage of me reacting to the list and seeing what books are on it. Hi everyone, it is currently January 5th and I know this vlog isn't going up until February, but I really just want to find out the books that are on this list, and I didn't want to react without doing it on camera, or I didn't want to open it without reacting on camera. So here we are. One thing I do want to say before I get started is I know that I did this last year. I read from the New York Times Best Horror List for 2023, but I didn't mention, at least I don't recall mentioning in that video anywhere, that that list last year was written by Gabino Iglesias, who himself is a horror author. I have not personally read anything by him, but I have seen a lot of book reviews and a lot of positive opinions for the things that he has written. So it just has me curious if this year it's going to be written by the same guy, or if it's going to be a different horror author or somebody else entirely different. I'm not really sure, but I just felt like mentioning that. Why am I nervous for this? Hopefully there's a lot of books that I've already read so that I don't have to read so many in one video. Okay, the best horror fiction of 2024. Okay, so this is written by Gabino Iglesias as well. So I wonder, I guess he does it every year maybe? I'm not sure. But I think I definitely have to read one of his books at some point in my life. Okay, I'm nervous. Oh, I have not heard of this, and it's a short story collection. Not A Speck of Light by Laird Barron. I know I've heard of this author before, but I have not seen this book around, and it's a short story collection. Oh no. Next. Okay, Stephen King, You Like It Darker. I'm not really surprised by that. I've seen it in a lot of people's lists for 2024, so not at all surprised. And it's another short story collection. Oh my god. Just when I was saying last year I read too many short story collections and I was burnt out. Okay, let's see what the third one is. The Eyes Are the Best Part. Okay, not really surprised by that. Already read it, so we don't have to worry about that one. Woodworm. Oh, I'm excited for that. This is on my TBR and I've heard good things. I know it's a novella as well, so that will be perfect for a reading vlog. Model Home by Rivers Solomon. This is also on my TBR, but I've kind of heard some mixed things about it so far. He describes it as a wonderfully surprising haunted house story that is also a sharp excavation of the human issues that plague us all. Maybe I should figure out what the other ones are about too. Okay, after Model Home we have... Oh, I've never heard of this either. Through the Night Like a Snake, Latin American horror stories. Okay. Love to pick up something Latin American, but another short story collection? Really? This collection features 10 spooky works from 10 of the best writers of narrative of the unusual. Memorable entries include a tale about exploring an old fascist home and a drama of murder and insanity with a twist ending for the ages. Offers a sweeping look at what is happening in the rich world of Latin American speculative fiction. Okay, so this is a collection of 10 different authors, which is very interesting. Okay, next we have another one that I've never heard of before, Remedy by J.S. Bruckler? I don't know how you pronounce that. Remedy is a brutal and claustrophobic novel that explores the existential crisis of a group of people violently yanked from their lives by a monster and stuck in a mirror world with new identities. That sounds so fun. Okay, next we have Eliza Clark. Wait, I didn't know Eliza Clark published another book in 2024, and it's another short story collection. Okay, first of all, Boy Parts by this author I really enjoyed. Their other novel, Penance, I think it's called, I still have yet to read, and now I guess I'll be picking up the short story collection. So, A Tale of Body Horror, an immortal being ruling over a post-apocalyptic world, a chronicle of human cruelty, and more. Making this a collection that is as impossible to categorize as it is to put down. Okay, next we have, oh really? Blood Like Mine by Stuart Neville. I don't know why I look so disappointed. I've seen this book everywhere, but it just has never piqued my interest. I don't know what it's even about. It's a gruesome, action-packed monster novel about a mother and daughter with a terrible secret on the run from an obsessed and crumbling detective. But at its core, the book is actually about family and love. Ooh, vampires! Okay. Alright, okay. I'm intrigued now because I feel like I'm in my vampire era at the moment. So now you have my attention. The next one is The Unmothers, which I have already read, and I gave it, I think, like 3 stars? Yeah, I think it was 3. I was gonna say or 3.5 stars, but I think it was just 3 stars. I thought it was okay. Oh, and that's the last one. Wow. So how many short story collections? That was like 4 short story collections, right? So we have the Eliza Clark one, the Latin American horror, Stephen King, and then Not a Speck of Light. So 4 short story collections. Oh my gosh. And I've only read 2 books off of this list, just like last year. So what is that, 8 books I have to read in the vlog? It'll be fine. I'm just not looking forward to 4 different short story collections. I'm gonna figure out what I want to do with this knowledge, and I'll come back once I'm starting the actual vlog. And now we're back. So I have all of the books here plus 2 on my Kindle, and I am ready to start reading. I do want to say that unfortunately there were 2 books that I was unable to get. The first one is Through the Night Like a Snake, the Latin American short story collection, and the second one being Remedy, which I'm really sad about because that book sounded so interesting. It was probably the one that I was like most excited for that wasn't already on my TBR, and I don't get to read it. It just wasn't, neither of those was available through my library, either physically, ebook, or audiobook. The audiobooks are not available anywhere that I've seen, and the only option for purchasing is a little bit more than what I feel comfortable with paying for a book that I've never heard of. You know, I'm trying to be smart with my money, so I will not be purchasing those just for this video, unfortunately. So we are only reading 6 books. It'll still be a good time. I will still have my hands full with this TBR, so without further ado, let's go ahead and start reading. Hopefully I'm in focus. I know the lighting is not good down here, but I am wrapping a birthday present for somebody, so I wanted to do a book update, talk to you guys about my book, the first book I started, while I do that. So I am currently 59% of the way through Blood Like Mine by Stuart Neville, which I started first for no other reason than this was the first one that I could get my hands on an audiobook of, because I'm reading something else right now, not for this video, but I wanted to have an audiobook to start. So let me start off by saying, if you know absolutely 0 about this book and you don't want to know anything about this book because you plan to read it, then skip ahead a little bit. I'll let you know when you can skip to, because there is something that, I'm using Christmas wrapping paper, there is something that people say about this book. Like, whenever I've seen people talk about this book, they say this one thing, and it's like, it's a spoiler for the book. And I think I even mentioned this in the intro of this video when I was like, oh, this book, people say Blood Like Mine is a vampire book, which is literally a spoiler for the book, because first of all, about 25% of the way through we start to get hints that like that is what the story is about, but it's never fully confirmed, and we're never fully told that this is like a vampire type of thing until literally 45% of the way through the book. And people are just out here talking about this book, oh, it's a vampire book, when you literally don't know that at the beginning. And there's absolutely no tape on this. Now I have to hunt for tape, so give me just a second. We're using packing tape because I cannot be bothered to look for anything else right now. So I don't know how this book was marketed, like as it was coming out and as it was like announced and everything, but in the synopsis, there is no mention of vampires or even any sort of like hints or something that alludes to the fact that maybe there's a creature in here or like a non-human aspect. So that really is kind of disappointing to me, because I'm like, dang, I wonder if like I didn't know that it was supposed to be a vampire story, how quickly I would have picked up on it. I think like definitely, like I said, it starts dropping hints around 25% of the way through, and I think it kind of is easy to pick up. But now, like, all of the fun and the mystery has been taken out for me. So it's reminding me of like a couple of different things right now. Obviously, because of what I just mentioned, it's reminding me of the book Let Me In, which I don't want to like go too far into detail of like exactly what's happening in the story, but there are a lot of things that are very similar between the two, I would say. Although I think Let Me In definitely leans more into the horror and is very bloody, and there's a lot of murder and killings, and it's very brutal in that sense. And this one is definitely more of that kind of mystery vibe. It's not giving a lot of horror at the moment. So we start off the book, we are following a mother and a daughter, and they are in a van, and they are very clearly running from something and trying to hide from something for some reason. And along with that, we also get the point of view from somebody named Donner, who is like a detective, and there has been a string of murders that have happened. All of these murders have occurred in very similar ways, which has led to a lot of speculation that there is a serial killer. But the big thing with these murders is that all of the victims are people that have past convictions of like some sort of like child porn or like sexual abuse of a minor. So it's clearly somebody that is like trying to get their own sort of justice and kill these people that have done really horrible things to children before. But obviously, you know, murder's like illegal and stuff, so the cops still have to look for this person. And we know in the beginning, like I said, this woman and her daughter are running from things, and we can kind of connect it, like, okay, they must have something to do with these deaths that are occurring, but you don't know what it is, you don't know what they're running from. So it's definitely more like thriller mystery vibes to me right now. I wouldn't say it's giving like full horror vibes at the moment, although there is murder and there is some like bloody scenes. It's very much a mystery thriller, and the vibes of it is really reminding me of These Silent Woods, which I don't remember who the author is, but that was kind of a mystery thriller, and that was about a father and daughter that were running from something, and it was like a mystery thriller but kind of light in that, and it was definitely more about like the connection between these two and their relationship, their family dynamics, and it just had more of like an emotional impact. And that's the kind of same vibe that this book is giving me right now. Like, I think it's definitely going to be more of like an emotional story and not really fully leaning into the horror aspect. Like, I think it's definitely one of those stories that is going to examine their relationship, and it's going to be the whole idea of how far are you willing to go, or what are you willing to do as a parent to protect your child. And maybe we're going to get into some darker territory, and I think I have a couple of theories. I think it's going to do some interesting things. There have been a lot of really interesting, sorry if the crinkling of this paper is annoying, but there have been some interesting like plot developments. It is interesting following not only these two, but the detective that is looking for them as well. And like I said, I have my theories about what's going to happen. I am enjoying it so far. Like, I'm curious about where the story is going to go, but I will say it's different from what I expected. Although I will just note that this is not a book that I had planned on picking up before this video. I have definitely seen it circling, and I've seen a lot of good things about it, but it just didn't really intrigue me too much. So I don't know if I'm going to have very strong feelings towards it, because I feel like I kind of know like what the story wants to do and how it's going to go. So maybe it will surprise me and maybe it will do something different, but I'm just kind of along for the ride. I don't mind the writing. I don't mind the characters. There have been a few things that just don't make sense to me. Not really with like the plot, but like with the way that certain people are reacting. Like people getting blamed for things that I don't think that they really should be blamed for. Like it just doesn't make sense the way that some people, oh wow, I'm wrapping this terribly. But people are just having some strange reactions to something that just happened in the last part of the book that I read. That's really all I truly have to say about it right now. I have my theories. I think I know where the story's going. I think I know the type of story that it's going to be and what it's going to do in the end, but it is holding my attention. I don't mind the writing. The characters are all right, and it's really, that's all I have to say about it at the moment. So I've officially finished my listen of Blood Like Mine by Stuart Neville, and I really don't know how to feel about it. I don't know like what to say about it. It did everything that I expected it to do, like the type of story it was, and I just was kind of wishing the whole time that it was going to do something crazy, switch up a little bit, kind of shock me in any sort of way, and it didn't. It did not do anything unexpected, and I feel a little bit sad by that. I just feel like I enjoyed the story and I enjoyed following along, but it never really gripped me or pulled me very far into it. There is something at the very end, like I wouldn't say it's open to interpretation, but it does make you question the things that you thought you knew. So I guess that could be kind of a little bit shocking, but that thing that I said, people are saying, oh, this book is about blank, and it spoils a big reveal in the book or a big part of the book, that does kind of change a little bit in the end. Like it makes you question if that's really what the book is about. But even that might be considered a little bit of a twist. I had spoiled for me from somebody else's review, which I'm a little bit sad by. I know I shouldn't like critique the book because of the fact that I got spoiled, but it just, even if I didn't know before going into it what this book was supposed to be about, I don't think it would have shocked me. I truly have nothing really to say about this. I think I'm gonna give it 3 stars, and that is why like trying to review or give my feelings towards a 3-star book is so difficult, because most of the time it's like this where I'm like, I didn't absolutely hate reading it. I appreciated the journey while I was on it, but I don't feel anything towards it, and I'm not going to think about it for very long. Would I recommend this? Yes, though I would call it more like on the thriller side than going into full horror territory. I feel like this is something that you would really like if you like kind of a crime thriller, and you like having the like perspective of the detective or somebody that is investigating this crime. Also, if you like, you know, very tense family dynamics, things that are a little bit supernatural but also taking place in the real world, then I would recommend this. But it was just okay. Like I said before this video, this is not a book that I ever really had an inclination to pick up, and I truly, after having read it, I don't feel like I would have been missing anything if I hadn't read this one. That's it for Blood Like Mine. Let's move on to the next book and hope that I enjoy it a little bit more. Hi guys. I just filmed the intro of this video, if this like clip looks familiar, but I wanted to update you on the first short story collection that I have picked up, which is the Stephen King one, You Like It Darker. So far I've read, I think, 3 stories. Give me a second to figure out what's happening. I've been going back and forth between reading physically and listening on audio, so I'm kind of trying to keep track of everything. I have read, yes, 3 stories so far, and I'm currently in the middle of the 4th one, which I feel like is sort of just a novella. It's very, very long, but really intriguing. So the first story was called Two Talented Bastards. And that was about a man whose father came into fame as an author in his 40s, and at the same time his best friend came into fame as, I think, an artist. And it's always been this big mystery, how did these two men from the same small town one day just happen upon fame in the creative, in creative careers. So it's been this big mystery, and this guy has written so many books. He's very, very famous, very popular, very highly paid for his work. And that is basically just the story of what happened to him and this friend of his and how exactly they came into fame. And I thought it was really, really interesting. I believe I rated it 4 stars. Let me check my notes app. I type out individual ratings for the stories as I go through them. The next story was called, oh my god, I almost just dropped the book. The next story was called The Fifth Step. This was very, very short, and I don't know, it was about some crazy guy in AA, and he's like talking to somebody and trying to get somebody to sponsor him, and then it just like goes weird at the end. I don't know, I didn't really feel connected to it. I didn't really care about it. I would give it 2 stars probably. And the third story that I read was Willie the Weirdo, which is about this kid. I think he's like 10 years old, whatever he is. He's a kid and he's a weirdo. He's definitely the strange one in the family, but he is very, very close with his grandfather, who is also kind of a weirdo. And the grandfather is very like introverted and like isolated. He doesn't really talk to a lot of the family except for Willie. They seem to have a really good relationship, and they spend hours like every day just talking to each other. And the grandfather is nearing the final days of his life, and his relationship with Willie is getting stronger, and it gets a little bit strange at the end. It's a little bit open to interpretation. I enjoyed it. I thought it was intriguing, but nothing that I felt fully connected to, so I think I would give that like 3 stars. And then the fourth story, that's sort of a novella that I'm in the middle of right now, is called Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. And it is this man who dreams one day of being at this abandoned gas station, and he uncovers a dead body there, and he cannot get the dream out of his mind. Like, it was very, very vivid, and he starts to realize like the place, the gas station, is a real place that exists, and he doesn't believe he's ever been there, but he decides to travel there just to see if it's real. And of course, while he's there, he actually does stumble upon this dead body, so he calls it into the police, trying to be the good guy, and now they are looking at him as like the #1 suspect. So it's been really, really intriguing so far. I'm very curious to see like where it's gonna go, because I just have this feeling that something like crazy and shocking is going to happen at the end of that story, but I'm really, really liking it. That's where I'm at with this short story collection. I'm going to go back to the audio, I think, and maybe finish this story that I'm on while I do some chores. I think I have to do dishes and some laundry, and then we'll see what happens from there. It's a different day, and I am now almost done with You Like It Darker. I think I have, how many stories do I have left? Let me take a look. I just have 2 more stories left. The last one that I just got through was another pretty long one, but it was interesting. Okay, let me back it up and let's go to where I last left you guys. I have to open up the table of contents. And I didn't bring my phone where I keep track of what I'm reading and everything, but I think I remember. So the last one that I was talking to you guys about is Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream, which was the first like really long one in here. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I already said what that was about, so I'm not going to say anything else about it, but I really liked it. The next one was called Finn, and this is about a boy who's just kind of always had bad luck his whole life. Like, bad things have just always happened to him, or he's been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that is the theme of this story. He ends up getting like kidnapped by these people, and they were after somebody else, and they ended up with him instead, and they don't believe him, and it was interesting. I think I gave it 3 stars because it does leave you like with a little mystery at the end. The next story was called On Slide In Road, and to be quite honest, I don't really remember what that one was about. It just like nothing about it hooked me or grabbed my attention, so it was not memorable and I did not rate it. The next one was called Red Screen. This is about a man who gets taken in because he stabbed his wife and murdered her, but he claims that wasn't his wife. It was somebody who like took over her body, like an alien or something. And I thought that was really interesting. And then that one also leaves you with a little bit of a mystery at the end. I don't think I gave that one a rating yet. Maybe 3.5 stars, maybe 4 stars. Like, I liked it. It was quick, to the point. It was a solid story, but it was short, so it didn't really do a whole lot for me. The next one was called The Turbulence Expert, which I kind of also felt similarly to. Like, I enjoyed it. It was about this man. I don't want to give it away, but he has a very interesting job involving planes and air travel, and when you're on a plane and turbulence occurs. It was interesting, but once again, I feel like it was too short for me to really care about it too much. Like, I wanted a little bit more from that one almost. So maybe I'd give that 3.5 stars. The next one was called Lori, and I enjoyed the story, but at the end I was like, what is the point? This is about an older man whose his sister comes to him and is like, here, I got you a puppy. And he's like, why the fuck would you do that? I don't want this. And she's like, oh well, you have a puppy now, and if we get rid of it, they're gonna kill it. So then this guy just has a puppy, but he comes to, he grows to love it and really care for it, and it's really sweet and endearing to see their relationship. And then something happens towards the end. The dog does not die. I will put that out there because I was getting nervous. I was getting scared for a little bit. I was like, this is just gonna make me sad, and I don't like this. But I enjoyed the story, but like once again at the end, I was like, okay, what was the point of that? I don't know. So maybe 3.5 stars for that one. And then the last one that I just got through, the other really long one, was called Rattlesnakes. And this is about a man who goes to Florida and he's staying in like one of his friends' homes there. They call it like a McMansion, like really, really big fancy homes in Florida by the beach. And the neighbor there is this older woman. She's in her 70s, and when she was in her 30s, she had 2 young sons, twins, that died, and she still believes that they are there, and she is always seen pushing around a stroller, an empty stroller, and talking to these children. And this neighbor man ends up getting involved in that, and it's kind of like a ghost story, but it was really interesting and I enjoyed the way it ended, so I would probably give that one 4 stars as well. It's good. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not hating it, but I feel like, I don't know, I just have a weird relationship with short story collections. Like, I would much rather pick up a Stephen King novel, and it's just interesting to me anytime I see people put a short story collection in like their top books of the year, because this came up in a lot of lists. You guys know that I watched a lot of top 10 videos on YouTube, top books of 2024, and I did see this one mentioned and on Instagram as well. Not enough for me to read it in those videos, but I did see it mentioned a few times, and it just always has me curious when I see that, or even the fact that there's 4 short story collections on this New York Times list. Because for me, I don't think I've ever given a short story collection 5 stars, because in order to do that, I would have to rate each individual story 5 stars itself, and that has just never happened. I feel like there's always stories that are much better than some of the other ones. Just like in this collection, like there's a good bit that I'm enjoying, but there's also some that I don't really care for. And so it's just really interesting to me, like, that people put short story collections on their best books of the year list. But, you know, if you enjoy, I guess, majority of them and you have a positive opinion of the book, then why not? I do wonder though, like, if this was If this didn't have Stephen King's name on it, if it was a different name on this, would this book still end up on so many best books of 2024 lists? And I don't know, but you can't put another name on it because it's Stephen King, and Stephen King has very distinct writing. We're back in the same place. I promise you, like, I move around the apartment. This is the easiest spot to film. And I'm currently here editing this video, so it just makes sense. Anyways, I finished You Like It Darker. I had 2 more stories when I last talked to you guys. So the first one was called The Dreamers, and this is about a man who gets a job working for this scientist who is going to do some very experimental work and studies into sleep and dreaming. I thought it was interesting. It had a little bit of kind of sci-fi elements to it, and I really liked it. I wrote down after I read it, I gave it 5 stars because I don't think it's 5 stars, maybe 4.5 stars, because I liked it more than the other stories that I rated 4 stars in this collection, but I don't know if it's like fully a 5-star story. But I really liked the themes that I explored and the direction that it went and the way that it was told. I really enjoyed. And then the last story in here was called The Answer Man, and this is about a man who is driving down the road one day and he sees a sign advertising The Answer Man is like however many miles ahead. And he ends up stopping, and it's this guy that charges him $25, I think, for 5 minutes of questions, and he is clearly like this supernatural entity. He is not a human, and he can answer pretty much any question. And I thought it was really interesting concept. I gave this one 4 stars. I really liked the Answer Man parts of it, and the parts where he's talking to him and asking him these questions, and just the whole idea of it I think is really interesting. But most of the story, you know, once he leaves that interaction with this man, we are learning about his life. He goes to war, he gets married, he has a child, and we're kind of following him through a very long time span of his life and after this interaction with the Answer Man. So there were a few parts that I was kind of less interested in, but as a story, I really liked it. So now that I have all of my ratings here, I'm going to add those up and figure out the average, which will determine what I actually rate it. I feel like as a collection, it feels like a 4, but we're gonna see. So give me just a second to add these all up. Oh, I'm kind of shocked. Like, did I do the math correctly? Because it came out to a 3.2. But in my head, it feels like more than that. But I guess that makes sense because I did give a lot of 3 stars to a lot of the stories. It's just like the ones that I enjoyed in here, I really enjoyed. So, wow, 3.2. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like it's more than that. I really enjoyed this collection. I need to read more from Stephen King. We all know this. I'm working on it, okay? He is as popular as he is for a reason. He's a very talented author, and I really like a lot of the themes within his stories. So I am glad that I read this because I wasn't originally going to pick it up because, like I said, I want to read more of his like older stuff before getting into his newer stuff. But it worked out really well that I got to read this and I got to enjoy it as well. So I started reading Model Home today by Rivers Solomon, and I am just about 50% of the way through, or like 51% of the way through. First of all, let's take a moment for the gorgeous cover. I know I'm not the first one to say it, but she's beautiful. I just love like this shade of green, and then the like black and white like illustration. It's just so, it looks so good. Anyways, we're in my kitchen because I'm making dinner, and I wanted to take a moment to tell you guys about it because if I have any fellow vegetarians slash vegans, this is something that I love to do with tofu. Okay, first of all, you take your tofu. I don't know why I said it like that. You take your tofu and you grate it with like a cheese grater, obviously, and then you fry it up with that, and you use some soy sauce when you fry it. And then I also put sesame oil, a little bit of sesame oil in, just because I love sesame oil. I love the way it tastes. I love the way it smells more than anything. But after you do that and it looks good, it looks sort of like that. I don't measure anything, but you take about half an avocado. with my fancy little avocado knife that my mom got me like probably 10 years ago now. So Mom, if you see this, I still have it. So you put your avocado into your tofu and then you have avocado fingers. So while I smash my avocado into my tofu, let me tell you guys about the book. It's like kind of hard to pitch it because I don't want to pitch it as a haunted house story because like it is, but it's not so focused on that. There are two books that come to mind when I think of this, and the first one is Diavola, however we decided that that's pronounced, and also Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey, because those are both like they're haunted house stories. Like there's definitely paranormal things happening, but the focus of the story is more on the characters and specifically the families and all of the dysfunction there and all of the issues there. And then it kind of gives you that whole feeling of like, are we the ghosts? Did we haunt the house with our trauma and our problems? And it's definitely giving me those vibes. Okay, my avocado is mashed into my tofu, so now I'm gonna put a little bit more of the soy sauce in. Then you take some of this stuff, spicy chili crisp. This is what it looks like. It looks kind of strange. Once again, I don't measure anything, but I get a little bit of that. And I also like to pour some of like the oil in as well. And last but not least, you take some mayonnaise and you mix it in there, and it's just kind of like, I feel like similar to what people do with like salmon or tuna or like any sort of like fish sushi, fish avocado bowl. I don't know what I'm saying right now, but you just mix it together, all of your ingredients, and it looks kind of like mush. Like it definitely doesn't look good, but let me tell you, it tastes amazing. I also normally would put in green onions, but I don't have any green onions today. And then you just serve it over some nice hot rice, and it's delicious. Now that we got that out of the way, let's finish talking about the book. So our main character in here is named Esri, and Esri is gender fluid, and they have pretty much always identified as gender fluid ever since they were a child. Esri has two siblings. I know one of them is Emmanuel, and Eve is the other one. And they had a very interesting upbringing. Their parents were pretty wealthy, and they lived in this really big home. Like it just feels like a mansion. I don't know if you could technically call it a mansion, but it was a huge house in this estate, like this gated neighborhood. So it was private, it was very secure, and they were also the only black family that lived there. So there was already a lot of problems that would arise because of that, and a lot of like microaggressions towards them within this community. But their relationship with their parents is kind of hard to describe. Like I'm definitely still learning more about it, but one of the things that really stood out to me was Esri mentioned that with their mother, they never truly knew how she was going to react to something. Like sometimes they could say something and expect it to be made into this big thing, and then it turns out she's just like, okay, that's fine, and is perfectly fine with it and perfectly accepting of whatever they say. And then there's other times where it does get blown out of proportion and it goes the opposite direction. So it's just the idea of like always kind of having to walk on eggshells and not ever knowing if your mother truly supports you and supports who you are, and not knowing how she will ever react to anything that you say. So Esri left home when they were still young and hasn't really been back since, doesn't really keep in contact with their parents, but they still maintain a good relationship with their siblings, and their siblings tell them that they need to come home. So Esri returns home and they find that both of their parents have died, and they can't really explain it or tell anybody this, but they know that it was the house that killed their parents. So we are kind of getting some flashbacks and then also a lot of present day chapters, obviously, as they are going through this and returning back to this home. We are learning so much about all of the strange incidents that occurred back then, all of this like paranormal phenomena. Esri has seen ghosts there, but there's also been just a lot of things that are just weird and like unexplained things that you can't really say it was a ghost because everybody's gonna think you're crazy, but like growing up there and experiencing it, you know that that's what it is. So it's pretty interesting so far, but like I said, it's definitely a lot about the family and the dynamics of the family and what it was like growing up for Esri, and then also the haunted house aspect of it. And the house itself is definitely personified. Like, it is one of those things where the house is a character in the story, and I think that the whole idea of that is definitely a feeling that it's really important to capture when it comes to telling a haunted house story, because it just makes it so much more engaging and inviting to the reader and so much more captivating within the story when you're viewing the house as a character of the book and witnessing everything that it's doing. I think is really, really fascinating, and Rivers Solomon is definitely pulling that off. This is the first book that I'm reading by this author, although I've heard a lot of things in the book space, and I've heard that they are a fantastic author, and I would definitely agree with that. Like, the writing in this is so stunning. It is very, very like filled with metaphors, I guess is the best way that I would describe it, but everything flows really well and it's very lyrical and there's just constant metaphors, but I'm really, really enjoying it. So right now we have Esri and their siblings children, and then also Esri has a daughter as well. Every single character in this family has a name that starts with E, so I'm not getting them mixed up. I think that they're definitely like distinguished, like they're distinct characters, but it is kind of a lot to keep track of when every single person's name starts with E. But you know, they stuck with the theme, I'll give them that. But Esri is staying with their sister and her children and just trying to figure out what to do about the death of their parents. Like I said, Esri's daughter is there as well, and there is like a side thing going on with the daughter, which is like really strange, and I'm very curious to see how that plays into the story, because it kind of felt like it came out of nowhere and I was like, okay, why are we like reading about this? But I'm sure it has a purpose and I'm very interested in seeing what that is. I'm gonna eat my food, and I probably won't read any more of this tonight. I'm planning to finish it tomorrow though, so I will see you guys tomorrow. I finished Model Home today, and it's another 3-star book, and I hate this because I feel like 3-star books are so hard to talk about because it's like I just don't have strong feelings towards it. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. There was actually, I'm kind of debating if I want to give it 3 stars or if I want to give it lower, because I'm almost wanting to do like 2 stars or 2.5 stars, because I wasn't a fan of the conclusion, the reveal that we get, like the explanation we get for all of like the paranormal stuff that was happening. I didn't like, and then I didn't like the very end of it. I put it down and I was like, that's it. Like that's how the book is ending. That's it. I enjoyed the writing, as I already mentioned. I enjoyed the characters. I thought it was really interesting to follow the family and all of their relationships and focusing on their upbringing and what it was like to live in this home. But the actual like horror plot and the paranormal and the haunted house stuff was lacking a lot. And then the conclusion, I feel like it makes sense, but it wasn't something that I liked. And I was just, I don't know, it didn't shock me, it didn't surprise me. I was just like, okay, so that's the direction that we're going. And then there was that weird thing that I said happened with Esri's daughter that when it was introduced, it felt like it came out of nowhere, and I feel like it still just didn't blend into the story very well. Like, I feel like I'm struggling to see what the point of that storyline was. It does make sense because it relates back to the main character and what we learn about the main character, but just as a like side plot and a storyline on the side, I don't think it was very well fleshed out, and there wasn't really any build up to it, and then something happens and then the book just ends, and I'm like why was that even included? Like where was the conclusion with that? Where did that go? Why was that there? Why did that happen? I think if you like things that are more quiet horror, once again focusing on a family and focusing on their relationships and dealing a lot with trauma and that whole idea of, is this house actually haunted, or was there something else going on because of all of the secrets and all of the negativity, the negative energy that our family brought into this space. Then I think you might enjoy this. Like, it's definitely more literary. The writing is so beautiful, but the story was very weak for me. I'm really sad, but I think I am gonna give this 2.5 stars, and honestly I don't have more to say about it. I have moved on to my second short story collection for this video, and I don't know, I'm not really enjoying it so far. I just don't really know how to feel about it. I've read 4 stories so far. The first one is called Build a Body Like Mine, and this was about a woman with disordered eating who also has a partner that has a past of disordered eating, and she has this hot new tip, this cool secret that she wants to tell us about, and it gets weird and gross and reminded me of Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, if you've read that book. I'm not gonna say anything else. I liked like the content of the story and the plot and like the direction that it went, but I feel like as a whole it wasn't very strong. I'd probably give it 3 stars maybe. The next one was called The Problem Solver. That one starts off with a woman telling who I'm assuming is her partner about a sexual abuse that has happened, and he's really upset and angry about this and wants to like go and find this person and say something and do something to him. And then, like, the end just kind of confused me in that. Like, I don't understand that story, like, what it was. So, I don't know, maybe I'd give that 2 stars. Then the next story was called She's Always Hungry, and that was a little bit of a longer one. And that is, like, I don't even know. It's, like, a weird universe that it takes place in at this village. How does she describe it? So, Eliza Clark very kindly provided this content guide in the back, and not only does it tell you like trigger warnings, but it kind of gives you a rundown of what the story is, which I appreciate because I didn't really understand that one. It says it takes place in a matriarchal village where men are heavily subjected to gendered repression and systemic violence, which I definitely did see throughout the story, but then there was like a weird inclusion of this like mermaid type of thing. And then once again, it takes a tiny little twist at the end. I don't know. I was really confused for most of that story, and so I'd probably give that one 2 stars as well. The 4th story has been my favorite so far. It is called The Shadow Over Little Chitaly, and it is literally, the entire story is just like reviews from this food place that is Chinese/Italian fusion, and all of the reviews are saying like some really weird things. Like, they order from this restaurant, and then when they look on the app, it says that it's like 80 miles away or 100 miles away, but the food always gets there in like 10 minutes, and it's always the same driver. It's like some Australian dude who pulls up in a car wearing a motorcycle helmet, and then it's just really weird. The food is never like what you ordered, and it's just always very strange combinations of things. And I just enjoyed reading the reviews. I really liked it, but I almost like want that to continue. Like, I want us to come back to this later on, because the last review ends with the woman that is like trying to investigate in this. She gets like a location for the physical address of this place and goes there, and it's just even more bizarre, and she is kind of like seeking for people to send her information if they find out anything more about this place, or if they have any weird occurrences beyond what they've already cataloged. And so that's when, like, it would be kind of fun if we like came back to that later in the book and like got an expanded, I don't know the word I'm thinking of, like a extension to that. I think would be really interesting, but I don't think it's gonna happen. So I don't know, maybe I'd give that like 3.5 stars because I liked it, but I want more from it, so I'm not gonna rate it 4 stars. The next story is called Hollow Bones. This is a pretty short collection overall. I think it's just about 220 pages. So I am getting through it really quickly. The font is really big as well, but like these stories are not making me feel anything, and they're all very short and abstract and weird, which is fine. I like weird things, but I also like to know what's happening. So I'm still reading She's Always Hungry. I plan on finishing this tonight because it's been a very quick read and it's just short in general. Right now, that's where I am. That's how much I've read. I'm on page 148. Let me see how many stories I have left. I only have 3 stories left. To be quite honest, I'm not really enjoying this collection. Like, I like Eliza Clark's writing and I like a lot of the themes that are in this collection, but it's one of those short story collections where every time a story ends, I'm like, I wish this was longer. Or it's just, I don't know, I feel like writing short stories, sometimes you really have to find the balance of like saying everything that you want to and doing everything that you want to in such a limited amount of pages. And a lot of the times when I read short story collections, there are plenty of stories where I feel like just weren't ended correctly, or they just end abruptly and you're like, but what about everything else? Like, I want more from this. And that's been like the overall feeling that I've been having towards this collection. When I finish stories, I'm like, I want more from this. So since I saw you guys last, I have read 4 stories. The first one was called Hollow Bones, and that was kind of like a sci-fi one. That is about it's so hard to explain short story collections because obviously like you don't want to give away what's in the story because it is short, but you want to be able to give a little bit about what it's about. Basically, there is a person that was doing like an archaeological dig on this planet, and something happened and they wake up and they're in the hospital and they don't know what happened. Their leg is all fucked up and things go crazy from there. I thought it was interesting. It didn't really do much for me. I wanted more from it. The next one was called Goth GF, which I thought was interesting. This is kind of like a workplace one. It is about this man we're following that is like obsessed with his female coworker who is like goth, and he's just really obsessed with her and talking about her body and finding her on social media and seeing that she does kind of like some provocative things on her social media, like sex toy ads and like pole dancing and things like that, and he just is constantly jacking off to her and fantasizing about her, and she's like really mean in person, and he ends up, you know, kind of really loving that, and maybe he has a kink for humiliation, which is cool. I'm not here to kink shame, but what was the point of the story? I don't know. The next one was called Extinction Event, and I think this is probably, aside from the other one that I told you guys, The Shadow Over Little Chiddly, which I don't even know if you could really count that as a story because it was just like a collection of fake reviews. But aside from that one, I think Extinction Event is the other one that I enjoyed the most. This is another like sci-fi type of one, and it is about these researchers that are collecting data from different planets, and there's people that specialize in all different fields. Like there's one who specializes in like sea life, and then there's one that specializes in plants, and just, you know what I mean, like all different specialties, and they're all working together and they're trying to find another planet to sustain human life and find a solution to all of the issues that are happening on Earth. So we are following one specific scientist, and her specialty is like cacti for some reason, but they find these like alien creatures on one of these planets that they want to study more, but obviously like this is nothing they've seen before, so they just kind of have to give it to the person that it resembles the most, and that just happened to be a cacti. So she is studying these creatures and finds out that they have a lot of like healing properties and are actually able to increase the quality of the air and decrease pollution and decrease microplastics in water. So they are then sent to Earth in order to you know, get the climate in better shape and improve the lifespan of Earth. And it was really interesting. Things take a turn towards the end, and this is one of those stories, like, I wish that there was more to this because I thought it was really, really fascinating and really intriguing, and I just don't know if, like, to me it feels like Eliza Clark just didn't know how to finish that one. I was a little bit let down by the way that it ended. And then the last story that I just read was called Night Stalkers. This was another one that I was like, literally, what is the point? Is about these two guys, and they decide that they are gonna go do acid. That's a thing that they do. They go down to the beach and they get high and smoke weed and do acid and whatever, which is cool and all, and they bring along this girl with them this time, and they end up getting high and tripping, and they get separated, and then they find each other again, and then it just ends, and I'm like, what was the point of that? Like, what was I supposed to take away from that story? Because I didn't feel connected to the characters. I didn't really care about what they were doing. There was one like little plot point that I was like, okay, I can kind of get behind this. And then once again, it just ends, and you're like, okay, why did I read that? Like, what's the point, you know? It's like almost like this short story collection is like Eliza Clark's like half-form ideas for other novels, which, like, I understand that is a lot of times, like, when a novelist writes a short story collection, it is these other ideas that they decided not to make into full-length novels. But these, like, they don't feel fleshed out on their own as independent short stories. They're just not very strong, in my opinion. So, I don't know. It just brings me back to the whole idea, like I was talking about with You Like It Darker, which, yes, if you didn't notice, although the video is formatted differently, I am filming these two updates back to back. But it just makes me wonder, like, what it was about this collection that led to Gabino Iglesias putting it on this list. Because did he actually love it? Did he really think it was one of the best horror books of 2024? Or was he just adding it on there for diversity? Not that there's anything wrong with that. I know this is like only the second time that I've done this, but from last year's list and then this one as well, I've noticed that Gabino Iglesias does like to support other like Latino authors and likes to kind of have a diverse list, which I appreciate. So it's like, is this really, did you really love this short story collection, or you just put it on the list because you appreciate this author and you wanted to shout her out? It just has me very curious, and I haven't looked up any reviews for this, but I'm really interested to see what other people are saying about it. I don't know. I just don't really know how to feel about this one. I'm not really a fan, to be honest, but it's short and it's been a quick enough read, so I'm going to finish the last two stories tonight, and I will let you know how it goes. I am back, and I have finished She's Always Hungry by Eliza Clark. I finished the final 3 stories, and I will say I enjoyed those stories more than I've enjoyed like the rest of it as a whole, and they definitely did go more into like horror territory, and I don't know, I enjoyed them. Let's see. The next one I read was Shake Well, and that is about this girl who is 15 and she's in a relationship with a much older man who sells drugs and generally is just like kind of a shitty person, and she struggles with acne, and she decides to try this acne product from the dark web, and it works in a very interesting way. I liked it. I wasn't completely shocked and surprised by it. Like, it didn't do a whole lot for me, but I did enjoy following the story. So I think if I were to rate that, I would probably give it like 3.5 stars. I don't even know if I've been like rating anything in this. I don't think so. So that'll be a little bit of a challenge to figure out what my overall rating for it is. The next story was called The King, and this is, we are in the perspective of this being that like appears human and functions as a human, but is not a human and is like the superior race who survives off of eating the flesh of humans. And it's got like a very comical tone to it because we are following this person, and they're telling us like, my father told me we were once the rulers of this miserable planet. We killed, we carved, we consumed, and we conquered. But for the moment, I work in tech. And like, just the tone shift is really funny. And then they're talking about how they like live off of human flesh and they eat human flesh, and they're like, also Diet Coke. And Diet Coke is like the only human food that they could eat without getting sick. And then there's another point later on. Let me see if I can find it. Let me tell you what the story's about before I read you this last quote that made me giggle. But basically that is the character that we are following, and then like the apocalypse happens and they come out of the apocalypse like 150 years later. They've just been in hiding, and they meet up with this group of survivors and start a cult and lead all of these people and command them and threatens them and just has all these people living under their rule. But there's one point in here, it says, "We were in front of the shed where I kept my human cattle. You could tell because of the screams, and also the sign that says human cattle shed." I don't know why that made me giggle, but that gives you a little bit of an idea of what the content of that story is. And then the last one was called Company Man, and this is about a woman named Dora, and she gets into a relationship with this man, and she has a secret, she has a mysterious past, and there is some interconnectedness between that and this man, and it gets revealed very slowly. And I thought it was interesting, but honestly, like, it wasn't anything original, I guess, like super original, but I liked it for the most part. I think if I were to give that a rating, maybe I'd give it 3 stars, but I guess it's really irrelevant because I haven't been rating like anything. So I would say from this collection, the ones that I enjoyed the most were The Shadow over Little Chitaly, which I wish we got more from, Extinction Event, and The King, I think were my top ones. I really, really liked The King. So that's pretty much all I have to say about this one. As a rating, like overall, I'd probably give it like 2.5 or 3 stars. I just didn't feel like I was super connected to any of these stories. Like I said, I feel like some of them kind of ended abruptly or weren't as fully fleshed out as they could have been. I think that there was a lot of potential to a lot of these, but then also there were a lot of them that I just read and I was like, I literally don't understand what the point of this existing is, which maybe sounds a little bit harsh, but to me it just like I didn't feel connected to those stories. There's a few that I liked, but for the most part I was either indifferent or disliking these stories. Hello, me and the cats are having a cozy little girls' night tonight. My boyfriend is out at a concert. He went to go see Jeff Rosenstock, so he's having fun and I'm chilling. I started Woodworm today, which I don't know if you guys can see. It's currently in my little Kindle holder thing, which first of all is fantastic, and I have the little remote to go with it, so I'm just living my best life. Anyways, this is a novella. Okay, first of all, let me read the synopsis so I can figure out how it's pitched, but it's like a gothic, like haunted house novella. Okay, I just read the synopsis quickly because I've had this book on my TBR, but I just forgot what it was actually about aside from just being like a haunted house type of thing. So everything, I'm on chapter 3, which is 32% of the way through. Everything that has happened so far is something that's been mentioned in the novella, but in the synopsis. But this book, like, I'm fascinated so far. Like, the way that it's written is so captivating, and I've been highlighting so many quotes that I would just like to share a few things with you. So we start off the book. I don't think either of our characters have names, unless I'm mistaken, but we start off the book with reading from the perspective of this woman who is, I don't know if she's like returning home from somewhere or if she's just like getting home at the end of the day, but she lives with her grandmother in this home that has been in the family for generations. And I don't know if like her grandma has dementia. It's like mentioned that people think she has dementia, but there's also a lot of weird things that go on in the house, so maybe it's not actually dementia, but there's definitely some like weird things going on that we're learning about, and it's just kind of like accepted by these two and like within the family that there are spirits in this home, like this home is haunted. And so we are reading from this woman's perspective, and I thought it was interesting, but it wasn't fully grasping me, although the writing I think is gorgeous. And then the second chapter we switched to the grandmother's POV, and that had me hooked. Basically we learn about this disappearance of a young boy that was in the care of the granddaughter, and she's telling us in the first chapter that it was a mistake, like she wasn't looking and the boy just walked out of the house, never to be seen again. Then we switch to the grandmother's chapter, and she says, first of all, my granddaughter is lying to you. That is not what happened. She's lied to everybody and now she's lying to you, so let me tell you the truth. And I just love that like direct to reader, and I'm really enjoying the grandmother's POV. I don't know if we're gonna constantly switch back and forth, but I really liked the second chapter. We get a lot of history of this property, and then we learn about who built the house, which was, it's so hard because they don't have names. The grandmother's father is the one who built the house, and we learn about his backstory and some of the fucked up shit that he did. And it's just been so fascinating so far, like learning the history, and then also the way that the house is spoken about is so interesting to me. I want to share some quotes with you guys, and if you are not into that, that's totally fine. You can skip ahead. None of these quotes are like spoilers or anything. Like I said, pretty much everything that the synopsis says is what has happened so far in the book. But I love the first line of this book says, "I walked in and the house pounced on me." And like, tell me, like that I feel like just sets the tone so well. And once again, because I was just talking about this when I read Model Home, like it's such an important aspect in a haunted house story to give that house like character and make it feel like a part of like a big character in the story. And I think that like first line really sets the tone and just sets the vibe for the book. From the first chapter, when we are learning some more about the strange things that the house does and the spirits do, she says, "I put the clothes away in the bottom drawer of the dresser, but I know there was no point. I'd have to look for them the next day in the kitchen cupboard or on the pantry shelves or in the wooden chest in the hallway. It's always the same. You can't trust anything in this house, especially not the wardrobes or the walls. The cupboards a bit more, but not really." And then following that, she's bringing her grandmother down the stairs and says, "The steps creaked as if they were about to give way, though the old woman can't be more than 100 pounds. The body you see is actually all skin, empty peel with no flesh inside. When I followed her down, the steps didn't make a sound. They can't be trusted either." Okay, they have this like particular wardrobe in the house where you can hear like voices and like laughter from inside of it, and there's something happening, and our main character, whoever she is, she says, "I walked toward it, at which point the chair went flying and the wardrobe door burst open. The whole house huddled around the room, expectant." And like, that's what I mean, like giving the house character. The house huddled around the room. Like, I just love the way that that's written. I don't know. Okay, then we switch to the grandmother's chapter, and I love like the way she's just so chill. Like the way that they just accept that their house is haunted and they're like, yeah, whatever. It's kind of giving me like the September House vibes. Totally different like vibe to the actual story and the plot, but the way that the main character in there is like, yeah, my house is haunted, it's whatever, like I know which ghosts not to fuck with. So the grandmother, talking about the spirit, she says, "I hadn't seen any of them for a few days when one of them whipped out a hand from under the quilt. It was about to grab my ankle, but I gave it a good old stomp with the heel of my shoe. You have to keep your wits about you. Show them who's boss or you lose their respect and end up dragging them around the house hanging off your skirt. I don't want to go on forever just quoting from this book, so I just want to share one last thing that really stuck out to me. So like I said, we learn the history of the house, the grandmother's father who built it, and all of the fucked up things that he did in his life, which it does kind of mention briefly in the synopsis. I'm not going to get super detailed with it, but I really like this quote. It says, "My father hadn't given her that house," meaning her mother. "My father hadn't given her that house. He'd condemned her to live in it. It had been built on the bodies of all those women, and now my mother's body kept it standing. Her pain and fear. It wasn't a gift, it was a curse." So I don't know, I'm just like fully hooked right now. I'm so excited to get back to reading this book. I think that it's going to be more, not like subtle horror, but it's going to be more like literary and more like metaphorical, and it's not going to be totally in your face, but I think it's going to have a lot of important things to say. Like, I just think it's really interesting. The granddaughter and the grandmother are stuck in this house. Like, there's something that is keeping them there that they can't leave. It's like a curse, like they say, that they're destined to just be in this house and carry on all of this negative energy and all of these spirits that are continuing to live there. And I think it's really, really interesting. The woman's mother, we have learned, went missing. They said she got in somebody's car and was never seen again. And so there's a lot of interesting like news interest, like media interest in the disappearance of the mother. And then also like there's just all of these rumors and legends, I guess, throughout the town about this home and about its dark past. And then, you know, they think this old woman's crazy. They think she has dementia. And then we have the granddaughter who is babysitting for this family, and then the kid goes missing. And so now it's like, okay, what's really going on? So they kind of constantly have like reporters outside of the house trying to get glimpses of them, trying to get interviews with them. I'm thoroughly enjoying all of the aspects. I'm really excited to see where it goes and what sort of messaging comes across throughout the story. And I'm going to get back into this and I will update you guys later. It is now the next day, but I did end up finishing Woodworm last night, and I have decided that I'm going to give it 4 stars because I really enjoyed it. I think it was like the perfect little gothic horror novella. I know, told you guys how much I enjoyed the writing, which is really interesting. I know that I knew this before, but then as I was reading it, I kind of forgot. But this is translated from Spanish, and there is 2 different translators that worked on it, which I think is really, really interesting. Like, I don't know how like book translations work and everything, and how the 2 collaborated, and I just think it's really, really interesting that, I don't know, it's translated, but they still captured the tone of the story so well with the translation, and the writing was still absolutely beautiful. I think for a novella, it was paced really, really well. Sometimes that's kind of like a tough thing to nail down with a novella because it is so short. Sometimes it's you spend too much time on one thing and then something else doesn't get enough attention in the story, or things just go by too quickly. But I think this one was paced really, really well. I think we still get a lot of backstory on the characters and the setting and a lot of history on the home, but there is still mystery and action, not like action, but like there's things happening that keep you engaged in the present day timeline, along with the mixture of like the history of everything. So I just think it was really, really well done. I love where the story went. Like, I love the ending and how things wrapped up, and obviously I can't spoil that, but I really, really enjoyed the direction that it went. This book had a lot of commentary that I really appreciated. Not only is there a lot of feminist undertones and speaking on feminine rage, but there's also like racism that is touched upon, classism that is touched upon, and obviously a big focus on like generational trauma and the women in this family and how they essentially are like bound to the home because of things that happened in the past and things that are continuing to happen. But I highlighted this paragraph, which I really like, where obviously we know like the young boy that was in this woman's care went missing, and so she is speaking about that and talking about how he is from a wealthy family and he is white, and how we all know in situations like that, those cases get more media coverage and more resources put towards them than when a child of color goes missing. And our main character is basically just discussing like watching the mother on TV and seeing that she has her hair done, she has her nails done, she's got makeup on, she's not like losing herself crying. So I thought that whole scene was really interesting. She says, "All I could take in was her perfect hair, her perfect nails, her perfect shirt. How many people were behind that image? How many underpaid lackeys with mortgages and monthly payments and houses full of roach traps and mold stains did it take to get her looking so perfect?" I don't know what she said at the press conference, but that wasn't the point. The point was to show people this was no ordinary family and the boy was no ordinary boy. That he had to be searched for high and low with no expense spared and everyone working overtime and extra resources brought in. That this wasn't one of those cases where you call the family when the trail goes cold and say, "We're doing all we can. We don't have any leads. We're ever so sorry. We'll keep an eye out," and then bury the file at the bottom of a drawer. This was the kind where there's trouble if you don't get results. The kind where you might be phoned by a judge or a government minister reminding you who calls the shots and what'll happen if the kid doesn't show up in case you'd forgotten how things work around here. The kind that's shown on TV day in and day out and makes important people nervous, because those important people clock the manicured nails and cut glass vowels and expensive clothes, and they recognize one of their own. And then they go on to talk about like I said, children of color or children that are raised in lower income housing, and it says, "They don't have a lawyer or a maid or anything, and everyone can see it, and everyone feels sorry for them, but everyone also understands that those children do disappear. They don't speak foreign languages, and they've never been on a plane, but they do disappear. No one wants them to, and everyone thinks it's a shame, but, well, maybe a tiny bit less of a shame, since the press are quick to forget about them, and pretty soon they're just a number within a statistic, and everyone knows that's not a shame because no one feels bad about a number. You feel bad about the children with white skin and blonde hair when you know their favorite toy, their favorite color, and the name of their little doggy." So at times it is a little bit like really hitting the nail on the head, like pounding it into you, and you're like, okay, yes, I understand what you're saying. But I just really like the way that it's written, and I just really appreciated like all of the conversation on these things, race and class, and it just all came together beautifully, and I really enjoyed it. This is definitely a book that I would not hesitate to recommend. I totally understand why it ended up on this list, and I think this could be enjoyed by a whole lot of people, so go and pick it up. I am on to the last book for this video, which is Not a Speck of Light by Laird Barron. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is really exciting though, because this is, aside from the two books that I wasn't able to acquire for this video, this is the only one on the list that I hadn't already heard of, so I'm very excited to get to read it. This is, of course, another short story collection. But it's really interesting. The book itself is split into 4 different parts, and then I think there is 4 different stories within each part. So I'm not sure. I just finished part 1 and the first 4 stories, so I'm not sure how like exactly they're split up, if each of those 4 stories have like a different theme to them. But to go through the first few, the first one that is in this book is called In a Cavern in a Canyon, and this we are reading from this woman who is telling us this story about when she was a child, her father went missing, and they just kind of assumed that he just like up and left, because that's happened a lot in the town that they live in, that the men just up and leave their families, and he was never really like a very good father to begin with. But it turns out that maybe there was some sort of creature responsible for his disappearance, and our main character is learning more about this creature. It's very creepy, very enjoyable. I gave that one 3.5 stars. And then the next one I also gave 3.5 stars. That was called Girls Without Their Faces On. And I'm just now like understanding the title of that based off of the story. But this is about a couple that doesn't have a very healthy relationship. Okay, the cats are fighting. But we are reading from the perspective of the woman in this relationship, and her boyfriend is very toxic and mean and rude to her at times, and there is this weird apocalyptic situation happening. I don't want to give too much away, but I enjoyed it. You find out one thing about one character and it's a shock, it's a surprise, and then you find out something about the other character that's even more of a shock and more of a surprise. So I liked that one. I gave it 3.5 stars as well. I think I mentioned that. The next one was called Mobility, and I'm gonna try my best to explain this one because, to be quite honest, I don't fully understand what the hell was happening in that story. We have a man who is, his wife like breaks up with him. It's like, I'm leaving you for another man, and he ends up having this really crazy health scare. He's like shitting and puking everywhere, and it's never really confirmed, but I think we can kind of like guess that the wife possibly had something to do with that. He wakes up in the hospital because he was aspirating on his vomit, and then a friend hears about this and comes and picks him up and is like, I got a place for you to stay while you rest and you recover. And then it just gets fucking weird from there. Like, it was very like fever dreamy, and I don't fully understand everything that happened. Like, I was so fucking confused during that story. Sorry, I don't know why I'm swearing a lot right now. I was so confused during that story. I enjoyed it. It got dark and disgusting and gory, and I liked that, but I was also like, what the hell is going on right now? So I landed on 3 stars for that one. And then the 4th story in the first part was called The Glorification of Custer Poe. And we are reading from this guy named Custer, and he's telling us about his life and some stuff. I DNF'd that one, which maybe is kind of silly to DNF a short story, but like, I was like halfway through the story and I was like, I don't know what's going on. I don't really care. Like, I'm not really intrigued in this at all. So I'm just gonna skip ahead, and now I am on the 2nd part. One thing that's pretty cool is that each of these stories has like illustration in it, and I just love me a good short story collection that has creepy illustrations like that. It just always, whenever that happens, I just get reminded of scary stories to tell in the dark, because some of those illustrations were straight up horrifying for a children's book. That's all I've got to say about this right now. I'm gonna keep reading it. I don't know, I was thinking I would update like after each part and after each like grouping of 4 stories, but I don't know if I'm going to do that. I will say I like the writing of this so far. Like, I'm definitely intrigued, and I like how dark it's getting. Something I will say about this author is that he definitely knows how to like get those very compelling first lines that like hook you, that really draw you into the story. For example, the story Mobility, the first line says, Brian murdered a squirrel a few hours into his 11th birthday. And tell me that doesn't pull you in. You're like, okay, wait a second, tell me more. The story that is called Girls Without Their Faces On, the first line of that is Delia, however you pronounce her name. Delia's father had watched her drowning when she was a little girl. Okay, tell me more. Like, where are we going with this? So that's one thing that I'll say about the writing and the author right off the bat. I like the writing, I like the themes, but sometimes I don't know what's happening. Hello everybody. I am DNFing this, but I'm not DNFing it. Like, technically DNFing it, yes, but I got to the end. Like, I read most of the stories. It's just there were quite a few stories, not quite a few, but there were a few stories that I skipped and didn't read. Let me say, first of all, this is a very, very well written. This is a perfectly good collection of short stories. It's just not my type of horror. So I was going through so many stories where I just wasn't really caring what was happening. I wasn't really connecting with the story. I wasn't understanding what was happening. I would finish the stories and then literally 30 seconds later be like, what was that about? I don't even know. And I totally, like I said, admit that that is my fault. That is not the book's fault. That is not the author's fault. I would not hesitate to recommend this, but I would recommend it to like specific readers. Also, I wanted to ask you guys while we're here, as far as like vlogging short story collections, do you like when I go through and I'm like, this story was about this and this story was about this, like how I did for the other two short story collections? Or would you prefer that I review the collection as a whole and point out my favorites? Let me know, because I feel like when I watch reading vlogs, I like when they go through each story and they tell me what it's about, but I know that can get super long-winded at times, so let me know what you guys prefer. But as a whole, there was a lot of interesting things within this collection. Like, it went from cosmic horror to sci-fi to paranormal horror to apocalyptic horror to gory violence, and I think it all blended together really, really well. All of the stories could be called gothic horror. They were definitely dark and bleak at times. The writing was really, really good, but I just personally wasn't a fan of the style of it. Like, the narrative style just wasn't for me. I think from the first story, the author that this most closely reminded me of was Adam Neville for some reason. Like, the descriptiveness within the writing and a lot of the themes really reminds me of what I've read from Adam Neville, and though I do enjoy his books, I do recognize that sometimes they are kind of hard to read and they are kind of long-winded at times. I would also, obviously, like I said, this is a lot of cosmic horror in it, and there are so many references to H.P. Lovecraft, so obviously if you like H.P. Lovecraft, you might like this. I would say more like classic, old school, like gothic horror authors. If you enjoy that, I think you could really, really enjoy this one. I feel like I would recommend this to like fans of Stephen King as well, and I don't know if that's just because like I also just read a Stephen King short story collection, but I feel like, I don't know, I feel like if you like Stephen King, like you really like a lot of his stuff, then you might like this collection as well. So like I said, there were some stories that I skipped, there were some stories that I finished it and I was like, I don't really know what I just read, so I did not rate everything, but I did have one story that stood out to me, like by far the best story in here in my opinion. Where is it? It is called Soul of Me. That's the little art, the little title page for it. This story is about a dog. You are in the perspective of this dog the entire time, and I loved it so much. There's definitely something that you come to learn about this dog, that it's not like any other dog in the world. It talks a lot about reincarnation and death, and also the apocalypse, and also like your higher purpose and fulfilling your purpose in life. And it was just so well written and so fantastic, so emotional as well. There were some things that I highlighted. Let me see if there's any highlights that I can share with you. Okay, looking through my highlights from this story, there's nothing really that I can tell you guys, although I wish I could, because it kind of spoils like what is revealed within the story, but it was so good. Even just like reading through the highlights, it's like making me feel emotional towards it. So I would say, like, even though as a whole this wasn't my style, my sort of horror that I'm into, this story on its own I think definitely made it a worthwhile read for me, and I would highly, highly recommend, even if you pick up the collection and you just read this story, please do, because it's so good. I guess that's about it for this. I think I understand why it ended up on this list, because like I said, it was objectively a good book. It is very, very well written, and it has a lot of fun horror themes that a lot of people could enjoy. So I would definitely recommend this if this is your type of horror, like that gothic. Like I said, there's so many different themes going on in here, but it all connects really, really well together, and I think the author is very talented. I wish I had more to say about this, but like I said, that one story really did it for me. Like, that's a 5-star short story for sure. And that brings us to the end of the video. So I don't really have a lot of thoughts to say in reflection. I feel like it was kind of a very mixed bag in here. I had 2 books that were 2.5 stars. I had a 3-star book. I had a 3-star question mark short story collection, a 4-star novella, and this I probably won't rate, but a 5-star short story. So with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching. Comment down below if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. Thank you for staying tuned for this feature film. This is like a movie length. I hope you grabbed a snack before you sat down to watch this video, because I'm sure you needed it. With all of that being said, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you guys next time.